Welcome everyone to our podcast around CRA. Today we've invited Viktor from Sigma Software. I'll give him a moment to introduce himself in a moment. But yeah, just to get started, I guess we can just do a brief round of introductions, everyone. So I'll start by saying I'm Nicolas. I'm a solutions engineer at Codific, working for the SAMI team. You can go ahead, Dag.
Hi, my name is Dag. I'm a co-founder at Codific, and I'm responsible for the commercial side of the business, but also compliance and things, and leading the CRA project within SAMI.
And my name is Viktor. I'm security manager at Sigma Software. My background is more connected to the soft aspect of cybersecurity, so I'm not the technical guru or the guy you will ask to fine-tune your firewall. However, CRA, vulnerability management, policies, governance, and compliance, they fall under my responsibility, and I work with such type of projects on my daily basis.
Okay, great. Well, I think what we've mentioned so far a lot is the CRA. Maybe it would be a good opportunity to get started by first introducing what it is. So maybe Viktor, could you give like a brief definition of what the CRA is, why it's important, and why should companies worry about it? And then that, of course, you can feel free to add on to it.
Absolutely. So for those who haven't heard this word before, the term before, CRA, Cyber Resiliency Act, is one of quite a number of new emerging European regulations focusing on cybersecurity across different domains. In the previous years, we already have NIS2 in Europe. We have DORA, Digital Operation Resiliency Act, focusing on targeting specifically financial institutions. And CRA is another one from those series of regulations focusing specifically. It's quite complex to name the scope, but in a simple words, it's focusing digital products and sometimes software that falls under specific functionalities. It could be smartwatches, it could be software that can sign documents, it could be your, I don't know, smart lighting hub at home. A lot of things fall on the CRA, and it's a little bit frustrating for many people that you as a company may not be within the scope of CRA, neither 99% of your products, but that only one smart device management hub that you have in your product line will be within the CRA. This is why it's quite important to understand that regulation is not either black and white. It focuses on the product and a little bit on the company related to it, but it's not the case when you as a company must be CRA compliant or not. But there is still quite a lot of time before it will enter in the full force. If I'm not mistaken, it will happen in December 2027. And the main purpose of the regulation itself is to make the product secure by design. So all the products entering European market, either consumers or B2B segment, they are secured by design, and in this way they're well more protected and resilient to cyber threats.
Yes, so it covers, you mentioned NIS2. NIS2 is about critical infrastructure. DORA is about financial institutions. But then CRA covers all products with a digital component, which is a pretty broad definition. So it covers, it's hard to think of products nowadays that don't have a digital component. Maybe a pencil and a ruler, but it's interesting where the scope limits in software, because you also have to deliver the software. So if you're doing SaaS, it's not included. SaaS in the cloud is not included, but if you're doing a SaaS solution on-prem, then it is included because you're handing over the software to the customer, assuming you're handing over the software to the customer. It connects to the safe product labeling from the European Union, this thing you may have seen on toys when you were kids, that has existed for a while now. It expands to that. So now Also, things we deliver digitally will have to have this product safety label of the European Union. Within that, there are different classification of products. There are basically 3 classifications. There is the level 2, which is the highest level. These are things like operating systems, routers, things like that. Then you have level 1, that's slightly lower. And then you have the unclassified, which is the vast majority of the systems. But the interesting thing here is that the principles of things that you need to comply to are actually the same for all the classes. What matters is how you demonstrate compliance. So if you're in a class 2 product, you need to involve a third party and you have a more robust attestation process. Whereas the vast majority of products in the uncategorized group, you can self-attest. So you will have to demonstrate that you are compliant with CRA. Then there's a long list of things to comply with, but there is a very important principle, is that the level of your security should be risk-based. So you should have some kind of analysis of how risky your product is. You need to have this well documented, and then based on that, you set the bar where you feel comfortable. And you can choose where you set the bar, but it needs to be very well argumented.
Yeah, that's quite a good point, honestly speaking, that for the products that already exist, but they will continue to be on the market when the CRA will get to its effective date, there definitely will be some technical, solution-wise, architectural-wise aspects that do not fully comply with the requirements of the CRA. For instance, we had quite a good example recently when the product, it does not allow a user to postpone or reschedule the update. So, and at that point, and it's not an issue. However, the CRA, it has this requirement that user must have the opportunity to be in charge and control when the product is updating the software. And no one will redesign the product existing. That's why your only path forward is to work with a good justification, explanation, and documents explaining why this is not a vulnerability and how you implement something known as compensating controls around it.
Okay, great. Well, that's a very comprehensive answer from both of you. I think one small follow-up question, just out of curiosity, and I'm sure the audience will also be curious about this. Why is it that SaaS products are not included within the CRA? Can you maybe give a short explanation of why that is the case? I know Viktor or Dag who would want to take the lead on this.
I'm not really sure why they haven't been included. I think while they were working on CRA, they went back and forward a few times onto whether or not they are going to be included. I think the idea is that they are or will be included in another set of regulations, specifically around cloud solutions. That's the best answer I have. There may have been some pressures from the industry as well during the process to exclude certain things. But yeah, I don't really know actually.
And I also think that how sometimes European Union approach new regulations, they do it step by step. So for example, there was NIS, something called NIS years ago. Then we have NIS 2, which is a stricter version. So maybe this one, they are, as Doug mentioned, critical. The primary focus is something within the critical category. So firewalls, security gates, routers, CM systems, whatever. That's very big aspect. Of course, everything related to safety, smart cameras, whatever. Once that will be in place, they can just expand the scope and add new products and improve the regulation itself based on the outcomes. Because as it always comes with European regulations, and we have seen this with DORA earlier, there is a lot of uncertainty within the requirements, and all those uncertainty will be addressed somewhere closer to the effective date, or maybe 6 months even after the effective date. What do you mean by no known vulnerabilities? What is exactly the proof of having this process in place? Will it be considered as compliant or not, and so on? And with SaaS and the shared responsibility model, the level of uncertainty also can be greater. That's why maybe at this point of time they decided to skip on this.
Yeah, and also it's product safety, and SaaS is technically not a product you deliver to your customer because it's strictly a service. So it's categorized differently into the legislations that cover it. So it may sometimes be NIS2 if it's critical infrastructure, but then we're talking about the cloud infrastructure running your SaaS applications. I wouldn't be surprised, as Viktor says, that in the future, if CRA ends up having the impact that it hopes it does, raising the security of most products, that there will be a new generation of legislation that also covers cloud applications, because in the end, most of the software we run nowadays runs in the cloud, runs less and less on computers. But yeah, this is product safety and not application safety.
Okay, great. With that being said, I'd like to move on a little bit to the obligations of within the CRA. So within this, there's, let's say, two parts. Like, first of all, are there any main obligations that you think would be important to highlight? And the second part is which obligations of the CRA do you think companies in the industry will struggle the most with? Which do you think are the ones that will be the hardest to comply with based on the current landscape? Maybe Viktor, you can go first.
Yeah, thanks. So when we are there's the first part of the question. When we are talking about obligation and something absolutely new, the main big topic that is discussed quite often is SBOM, software bill of materials. So this is, at least from my memory, this is the first example when the regulation, some kind of regulation, is explicitly requiring the companies to know what are the components of their software, document it, update it, and maintain it. So it's quite a huge step forward. Almost all the companies, they don't have it. They will need to start generating the SBOMs. But from the perspective, what will be complicated and with what companies or people may struggle, SBOM is definitely not a huge issue. So you just add a new module in your subscription of SaaS and run it. So several steps. The only complex thing is to understand the depths of your SBOM, but still it could be done. It's 1 or 2 days of discovery. But what is really complex from my perspective is the vulnerability management and everything related to risk. A lot of companies which fall within the CRAs, they are purely engineering companies, people with a strong engineering background, capable of creating some really complex technical solutions. However, for them, risk management, risk registries, policies, documents, and all these things, they are not that familiar. And to be honest, they are not that paying attention and treating these things seriously. What I mean by this is that people greatly understand the engineering aspect of things. They understand that the device is done from this plastic, safety requirements, durability, whatever. But when you talk about, hey guys, what threat modeling methodology you use, they're like, yeah, we have some Excel. It's done by the guy from department 2 years ago. And, just basic risk. Nothing serious or special. And the CRA, it will not allow you to go with that approach. You need to think about, some manipulations with the software. You need to think about how will you protect the keys. You need to think about whether it's possible to install some malicious update on the device in your house and through this control the device. Whether it's possible to infect your update as a provider, which you will then push to all other devices. A lot of scenarios and a lot of justification needs to be done. As I mentioned earlier, for the devices that are already in development, or sometimes maybe due to engineering reasons, you don't always will 100% comply with all the requirements of the regulation. whether it's connected to the updates, whether it will be connected to patch management, whatever. So in order to justify all those requirements, you will need to do a fair amount of paper homework to write the policies, to think about compensating controls, and to explain and provide reasonable assurance, how it's known in the audit world, to your choices and to the technical decisions. And this will be quite a journey, I would say.
Yeah, I'd like to jump in there. There are, in my head, there are kind of like three big buckets that are going to be large challenges for our organization. One is one you mentioned broadly. That is the vulnerability management. So basically, the statement is you cannot deliver a product with known exploited vulnerabilities. Now, the easy way, it would be great if you could say, oh, well, I didn't look, so I don't know. But unfortunately, that doesn't count. If you reasonably should have known, meaning that the CVE is out there and the vulnerability is known, and you have that component in your product with a non-exploited vulnerability, then you're liable for it. You cannot say, oh, but I didn't scan it, I don't know. So there's like a whole segment of SCA scanning, of SBOM management. Then the question is, how deep does your SBOM have to go? That's a big bucket, as you mentioned, that companies are not yet doing. The other thing, which a lot of products don't have, is that you have to provide updates for the reasonable lifetime of the product, and in most cases, at least 5 years. There are a lot of products that do not have a system for updates. So we'll have to figure that out. We'll have to figure out how to do that. What if you're buying your products from a Chinese white label manufacturing, you're sticking a brand on them, and you're selling them in the European market? Who's responsible for the updates? How does that work? There's going to be a whole lot of contractual implications there as to, okay, how do we maintain a product when we're just an importer, for example, but we're the ones responsible for selling it on the European market. And yeah, you need to have that infrastructure to be able to push updates to these devices and to be able to update them. The third big group is the risk analysis. Everything has to be risk-based, so you need to have a proper argumentation as to what the application risk is, what the product risk is, what the risk profile is, and this best practice, which we already know for a long time in OWASP and OWASP SAM, for example, that we should be doing this, but it's not very often done for most of the products, and that's going to change a lot. So at least there is going to have to be some paperwork around analyzing the risk of a product, which is then the fundamentals of everything else you decide afterwards. As Viktor said, you may not be able to fill every hole and comply with every detail, but you need to be able to argue it starting from your risk-based analysis. So vulnerability management, updating, and risk assessments. Those are the three big buckets for me.
Okay, great. Now, something that would be important to highlight as well. Obviously, both of you, Dag, as part of Codific, and Viktor as part of Sigma, you have customers, quite a lot of customers in the European Union, a lot of which obviously develop software and will fall within the CRA. What is the impact that this regulation, I will maybe even say, like, what's the financial impact, maybe the business impact that this regulation will have for customers that fall under it, right? For the companies that fall under it, what can they expect? What could be the impact to their business? Maybe
I think that.
Oh, sorry. Go ahead, Viktor.
Oh, excuse me. I think that, frankly speaking, the extent of the financial impact will be clear only somewhere by the end of this year. And what I mean by this is that, at least in Germany, the BSI, they they promised to provide the self-assessment checklists in June this year. So once the companies will see the self-assessment checklist and understand how strict the regulator will be about CRA, they will understand the extent of their efforts. Because a lot of people are still expecting some kind of a little bit GDPR story, when you will write 2 documents, 3 documents, 4 documents, add, I don't know, several new fields on your website, and that's basically it. However, if the regulator and the European Union will go strict about it, how they have done with the DORA, the implications will be quite huge. And we already see in the companies and in the product team specifically, they are changing roles and responsibilities. They are adding people specifically responsible for CRA program, so that the people who have a little bit wider view on the product, not concerned only about the software, but also thinking, okay, and what is about key infrastructure? Okay, and what is about, I don't know, protocols and connectivity and the firmware? So a lot of other things. And these things are often spread around different teams. And now having one person responsible for that, you need to have at least one person responsible for that. Someone who understands everything that is happening on the product. Not only someone who knows how they write the code, or the separate person who knows how they write the user documentation, for example. Now, all those things will be under oversight of one person that know everything about the specific device.
And that person will need a good tool to put all of that in.
Yeah, now we're slowly getting that if that person is responsible, for instance, if you are the company and you have, I don't know, 35 products, and part of them are CRA compliant, part of them not. Getting the understanding what is happening even in 10 products at the same moment is quite complicated, really. So having some tools and standards and process internally, it also will be part of the journey a lot of companies will have to go through this year.
Yeah, one of the nice things that the European Union tries to do with these regulations, they did with GDPR as well, is make the financial impact of non-compliance scale with the size of the company. So it's not like a speeding ticket, which is the same fine for everybody, whether you drive a Lamborghini or an old Lada. So the fine depends on how big the company is and how much. So that means that the amount of effort that you would expect from a company is also going to be proportional to the size of the company. So very large, very mature companies, they'll have to be very diligent in their compliance, and they'll have to do more. Whereas if you're a smaller company, you can probably get away with a lighter approach. Maybe, you know, have one designated person that has to go through a kind of checklist, document everything, and save it in a good format, and have that for your products, and make sure you don't miss any of the big chunks. But everybody's going to have to do something. That's, on the other hand, for a lot of small companies, that's going to be really a problem, because a lot of small companies do not have application security expertise in-house. So they'll have to start worrying for the first time about application security, and all these concepts like security by design, like vulnerability management, which they have never heard about, which hopefully will be a positive byproduct of this regulation, is that everybody will start worrying a little bit about it. Hopefully, it doesn't get just passed on to a lawyer that writes a little bit of documentation without even knowing what the product does. Unfortunately, that may be the case sometimes. But best case scenario, everybody gets the kind of basic cyber hygiene internalized, and that would be a good improvement for the industry and for for the cybersecurity, application security consultancy industry, this is of course big business in the coming years, because a lot of companies will need more people and more guidance in order to make sure they comply with it. Again, some of it will be legal, some of it will be actual application security. As application security people, we will always complain about the lawyers writing BS in order to comply, whereas we want to do fundamental security. But hopefully there will be a little bit of both.
Okay. By the way, fun fact. I think it's either in Norway or in Finland. It's in one of the Nordic countries. Did you know that speeding tickets are actually proportional
Finland,
to your income?
yes.
I am.
I
Yeah,
also,
so-
when you mentioned that example, Doug, I also thought about Finland. A friend of mine, he lives in Finland, and they all even have the statistics of the most expensive speeding. So
Yeah.
2
Does
years
your friend drive a Lada or a Lamborghini?
no, he does not ride at all. He lives in Helsinki, so he
Okay.
decided to skip on that. But there is a statistics in the country for who has the most expensive fine for crossing the speed limit, and it's always some CEO or other guy.
Mhm.
Yeah, they get fined like a few thousand euros for every speeding ticket. But yeah. Anyway, moving on. You were mentioning tools before, so I think it's a nice segue. Just asking then which tools and also maybe which frameworks, right, would be useful for the CRA. Obviously, OSSAM has been mentioned in the past to be a framework that can be useful to help comply with the CRA. Maybe Dag, you can start by explaining that, and maybe which tools would be useful to use.
Yes, so OWASP-SAM is the software assurance maturity model of OWASP, and it is basically an inventory of the best practices from a process perspective on everything that a company that produces software could do. It has different levels of maturity, and then based on where you are, your risk profile, the risk profile of your products, your appetite, and so on, you can choose a level that you feel adequate and you want to work towards. This fits very nicely for to prepare for CRA, because there has been a mapping created, which I contributed to, between OWASP-SAM and CRA, actually between CRA and OWASP-SAM, translating it into which processes do you need to have in place in order to be able to comply with CRA. For example, we mentioned vulnerability management. If you're not looking and I don't see anything, it doesn't count. You need to be looking. So what does looking mean, and what does it mean to be looking well? Well, that's OWASP-SAM has very clear prescriptive measures for that. So I think right now, SAM is one of the better, I hesitate to say only, good framework to start laying out all the things that you need to do. From a application, from a security requirements, we can also work with ASVS, another OWASP project that specifically has the security requirements that we put in two teams at the beginning of, well, in each sprint, so that the security requirements are a fundamental part of the development, so that they're taking on into the applications. This is going to play a big role as well. I'm not aware of a complete mapping between CRA and ASVS yet, but I think there will be one by OWASP Global AppSec Vienna later this year. So this is being recorded in January. By June, probably there will be a mapping to ASVS, or the kind of translating the requirements from CRA into ASVS requirements. So from a framework perspective, those are the two that are on top of my mind. Of course, there's other things like SBOMs. There are also standards around SBOMs, like Cyclone DX, or another OWASP project that we obviously will be using in order to make SBOMs.
I think that I will add only one point regarding SAM, that SAM as a framework model was explicitly mentioned in the BSI guideline for the CRA, one of the first documents and guidelines of the regulation, under the section of secure by design. So in order to prove that you are developing things secure, you need to show that you are thinking about everything in some structured way, and having some implemented and documented helps you to provide the, first of all, proof, secondly, to do things really in a proper way, not to miss anything or overlook anything. Also, to add regarding some framework standards, etc., definitely helpful will be to use something for threat modeling, whether it's Stride, Pasta, whatever your team is comfortable with. There is no requirement on what type of approach you need to use. You just need to do it properly and have it in place. And for something related to policies, documents, and risk, ISO 27001 as a standard really well known across the market. It might also help you to add additional documentation if you're lacking it, or to support you in writing some exceptions, let's put it this way, in case if you do not comply with specific areas, you need just to include those exceptions justification within your information security management system, and it will be enough. So nothing super new, I think, just already well established and known standards on the market. The only new thing that you need to start doing things, not only thinking about them, but really to perform threat modeling on some recurring basis, to perform some SAM assessments.
You need to start doing things, and you need to document it, because
yeah,
you mentioned earlier that the companies that don't do anything, they'll have to start doing something. But there's also a big group in between, where I know a lot of people who work in medium-sized companies or software startups or something like that, where they do have quite a few things in place, but it's all like tribal knowledge, and it's not very well structured and organized. It's like, okay, threat modeling, Nikolai does threat modeling. We'll have to go.
Yeah.
And yes, risk profile. I think Jimmy does risk profiles. But then, if everything needs to be well documented, put into on paper and well structured, and the different activities that live in people's heads need to come together to make a picture that makes sense altogether.
Yeah, that's a great point, to be honest, because pretty often you come across such examples and what do we do with SaaS? I don't know, but maybe Jürgen. Oh yeah, of course I run SaaS every Friday. Yeah, sure. Well, you're asking, but nobody except him really knows this in the company. What they are testing, what are the test cases, what is happening there. In smaller teams, people are pretty confident about each other, especially if they work for quite a while. That's why they see all this additional documentation just as a burden and something really useless. Let's make things instead of writing documents.
Yeah, and that's where SAM is really useful. If you do a SAM assessment, you're actually going through all of the questions and you need to write down all of the answers. And if you have a tool like SAMI where you can keep the documentation as well, then maybe you're already there. Maybe you're already doing everything you need to do. But by doing the SAM assessment, you have just inventorized everything that there is. Meaning that if you have to demonstrate compliance, everything is there ready for you to grab, and you don't have to rely on tribal knowledge in somebody's head somewhere.
Yeah, so just focusing a little bit also on the tooling aspect, some people might be wondering if you could do all of this with spreadsheets. Wondering if it would be possible to carry out all of the assessments and compile all of the information that you need with spreadsheets. Do you think that would be enough, Victor, or do you think maybe having a tool would be?
Yes, you can do it in spreadsheet, especially if you like pain.
Yeah. I think that's the short answer. Of course you can. Everything could be done in Excel, in some people shared drives. Then you will forget where is the specific Excel. You start searching for it. You're like, oh gosh, it's not on my drive. It was on someone. You go to the tab shared with me. Suffers there. Someone named it in a different way. You cannot find it. So it's quite a journey.
It's been 42 different versions. It's been somebody messed with a formula somewhere they shouldn't have messed with. Nobody noticed. Those numbers have been wrong for months.
But again, don't get me wrong. If you have one product and you are the only owner of everything and it's purely your Excel, yeah, sure. I think it will work fine for you. But when we get to the point when it's a product company and you have a number of products with different product teams, then it's getting a mess, because each product team has its own Excel. They feel it. Then somehow you need to get their Excel to your Excel, or you need to know where all the documents are, when they are updated, whether they are updated. Is it the new information? No, someone is on vacation, like quite complex. And the second part, if you want to visualize this, then the Power BI or some other stuff gets into the game. You need to find people capable of doing this. Then formula breaks, pretty often breaks. Then you want, I don't know, maybe see the specific product. You need to add additional lines of code to see the specific, I don't know, thread or something else. So it's quite complex. But it's definitely possible. However, there are to make life a little bit easier.
I agree with Viktor. It very much depends on the scale of your organization, and the problems with working with Excel become exponentially bigger the more people and products are involved. So if it's you and the cat is not touching anything, then it's fine. But if there's different people, different projects, different processes, different lines of reporting, then yeah, it's nice to have a good tool then that keeps everything in a central, streamlined way.
Okay, you heard it here first, guys. You need to use SAMI. That's basically a conclusion that I reached.
But to be honest, when we are touching the SAMI topic, I think what is great about SAMI, specifically for the smaller companies, because the bigger companies, they might already have tremendous system built within Excel, Power BI, connected to the compliance department, engineering, whatever. But if you are a smaller company and at some point of time you will discover that you need to be CRA or something else compliant, it's a good starting point, really easy and straightforward to understand how you're doing with development of your software or a product. Like, we typically get it done with the customers in 2 or 3 sessions. So it's 2-3 hours of time. And you already get a good understanding on 2 big items. First, are we doing something? Secondly, do we have this documented? It's already quite a big part of work done. So after, and yeah, of course, you have it visualized, whatever, it's really good. But the main point is you can really understand where you're standing. So at some moment of time, it just, at the end of the interviews, you say, okay, good. So we are good in engineering. We have all the process. We just like all the documents. Let's focus the next 2 months on writing the documentation, but in overall, it's good. Or the situation may be, okay, so we are not testing anything. That's the point. I think we need to rethink a little bit, because I was expecting that Jim was doing this every Friday. Unfortunately not. And it also could be the case. So quite helpful to get fast results in understanding where you stand now.
Yeah. Okay, perfect.
Yeah, and also I think what's very useful in SAMI is that if SAMI today has the CRA ready target posture. So if you've done a SAM assessment and you set a CRA readiness target posture, it will tell you the gaps. So it will tell you where you need to put processes in place or document processes in order to be ready for a CRA. That's really good today while you're preparing. Later this year, probably by the middle of the year, there will be a full CRA feature within SAMI, which will be largely built on OWASP SAM, but sometimes especially in a smaller organization, they don't feel like learning about SAM in order to do CRA. They want to comply to CRA. Why are you bringing in another framework? So what that's going to do is that it's going to do that based on SAM, but without saying that it's SAM. It's going to cover all the processes that you need to have. But then there are a few things that are not covered in SAM, which are mostly about communication and reporting obligations. You need to report to the customer in some cases. You need to report to authorities. You need to These things are not covered in SAM, so they will be added as like an extra section of questions. And then with that, you will have a complete, easy to use guide on complying with CRA that can assess your different product teams to see if you're ready, and have everything in one place. It will also spit out the documentation that you need. So yeah, that's going to make everybody's life easier.
And I think that's also from the point of maintaining the process in the future. It will help you just to continue being OP parent as a CRA in the future. Because as all of the results are in the console, you can double check them. Teams can easily update them, and you can see the statuses across different domains. So it's really helpful in terms also of maintaining compliance for the future.
Okay, perfect. That sounds great. Just to wrap up here, as a final question to leave the audience with. Okay, so let's say someone took the 40 minutes or however long we've been recording to watch this podcast and learn about CRA, and now they're very worried about the regulation and would like to get started with complying with it. What do you think would be then the first steps? Like what do you think is a good action plan maybe? So where can they get started? Maybe Viktor, you can start.
Well, I would say that if you are worried, first of all, you need to double check and get a proof that you have the reasons to worry about. But if your product falls within the CRA, so sometimes it's not that straightforward. Of course, you might have, home smart cameras that record a baby and also had a speaker, so you are able to connect it to your phone and speak with your baby, and it's just no-brainer. Yes, of course, you have a CRA scope, or you might have a firewall. However, you might be producing some kind of microconductor that is part of the bigger device, and you are not explicitly sure about this. In this case, it's a good idea just to send an email to the regulator in your country. They are already regulator responsible in Germany, in Sweden, and in a number of other countries, just explicitly to ask them, hey guys, we have the device A, this is a functionality, could you please confirm whether we fall within the CRA obligation? And if yes, what is our class? As Doug mentioned earlier, I think you definitely, in this case, you will fall somewhere under unclassified, but still you will have the proof. If this is the case, now you need to worry. Now it's time to understand how you do your device, and a good starting point will be an assessment. And typically, we prefer to start with 2 assessments. In this case, first is pure SAM assessment, just to understand the software development process, and also all other matching pieces. You already, after the assessment, you already know something about the governance, incident response, about security testing, whether there is SaaS in place, how you developed it, a lot of things related to CRA. And then you can proceed with more specific CRA-focused activities, like, I don't know, whether you have the proper process for this secure vulnerability disclosure. It's a specific CRA stuff. You need to have the page on the website, email for researchers, whatever. But starting with SAM assessment is a good point from my end. And it's really easy and straightforward, because so far I haven't seen open checklists, official checklist for CRA assessment. Maybe, as I mentioned earlier, in June they will appear. Then it's even easier. You can take the official checklist. Depending on the complexity and quality of that document, you may go with it. But until June, I think that SAM is a good starting point to start.
Yeah, I think I agree. It would very much depend on the size of your organization. If you're a very small organization or a very large one. If you're a very large one, you probably already have a compliance department. Hopefully, it's not only lawyers, and there's actually some application security people there as well. But they will probably take ownership of this. And the first thing is always inventorizing what you already have. You could be using another framework to inventorize what you have other than SAM. Maybe you're using DSOM or BSIM or any of these other frameworks. That's fine. Then start from there. There is also mappings in between these frameworks, which OWASP provides, so you can eventually end up at the CRA target posture as well, if you want. If you're a very small organization, then probably you want to do the SAM assessment yourself. It's not if it's just you or a small team. Let's say you can feed your company with 2 pizzas, then probably you can do the SAM assessment with in an afternoon. We just get everybody around the table, get 2 pizzas, and collect all the information, and then you know where you're at. Somewhere in between, when the organization is larger but doesn't have a dedicated application security team, I think that's the kind of case that you call in an expert like Viktor and Sigma, and you get them to help you with this.
Yeah, so I think it's depending on what profile of people you have. Not only about the size. So sometimes companies have really strong engineering background, like incredibly strong engineering background. But for them, cybersecurity, threat modeling, risk, vulnerability management, all those things are absolutely new world. So if it is the case for you, maybe it's better to ask someone for advice or support. But still, first of all, just get the confirmations that you are in scope. Maybe you are lucky or unlucky. Unlucky in terms that you are not in the scope of CRA and you will not put that level of efforts in making the product more secured, which in the end of the day is beneficial for everyone, having more secured, connected products on the market.
Okay, great. Well, with that being said, I think we're finished here. Thank you very much, Dag and Viktor, for joining today for the podcast episode. Yeah, very much excited to hear what the audience has to say, and if there's any feedback or any conversations. Maybe just to confirm, what would be a good, if anyone has any questions for you guys, is LinkedIn, for example, a good way they can contact you?
Yeah, absolutely.
Yep. Okay.
I think
perfect.
That's just the perfect way.
Okay, great. Well, thank you very much to both of you.
Thank you. Thank you, Viktor.
Thank you. Thank you, guys.
Take care.
It was a pleasure.
Bye-bye.
Thank you for having me today.